Hello, this is a workshop for marking the third core skills assignment, which is the session reflection. You might find it useful to have the following 4 documents to hand. The first is a handout of these slides. The next is the mark sheet for this session reflection. The third is the marking criteria, and the fourth is the core skills competency framework. Please note that we can only send the paperwork for your marking of this assignment to a UCL email address or a KCL email address or an Anna Freud email address. So please make sure that you have one of these accounts and that you check them at the time of the marking. As much as possible, you'll mark core skills assignments submitted by students within your modality module, but not within your tutor group. We do need to get the mark sheets back from you pretty promptly so that we can give the marks back to the students within the deadlines imposed on us by the colleges. And each tutor should be given between 4 and 6 assignments to mark. Now, of course, every assignment has a word limit, but we don't expect you to check the number of words in each of the assignments. If you suspect that the word count is high, then let us know. We'll check whether it's over the limit or not and apply any penalty to the mark that you give it. The word count of the tables, charts and boxes, etc. should not exceed 15% of the word limit for the overall assignment. Once you get to that point, in theory, you as the marker should stop reading those additional words in the tables, boxes, etc. Now, one of the reasons that we need you as the first markers to get the mark sheets back to us quite promptly is so that we can check mark. Now, we have a sampling procedure where we will check certain marks, and the details of that sampling are up on this slide. And if we think that the first marker has got it wrong, then we'll look at some of their other work and then we'll have a discussion with that first marker to work out what's going on. And it might be that we think someone's been a bit overly generous and we'll bring all of the marks down, or maybe they've been a bit harsh, in which case we'll bring all of their marks up. But actually, overall, our experience has been that the first markers are doing an absolutely fine job. Just occasionally, we try to nudge things in a certain direction, and it's been really variable. So sometimes we've had the same marker will be quite harsh on one person and quite generous on another. So this is done mainly through negotiation, and we just discuss why we have a different view and we work out what would be a good compromise. There are penalties applied if the students submit their assignments late. We don't expect you to apply those penalties, but we will do that. So really, I've put these up on this slide just so that you can tell the people in your practice tutor group in case they ask. In terms of whether different cases can be recycled for different assignments, the different modality modules have different rules about this. So from a core skills point of view, for core skills assignments, all of the assignments must be in reference to different cases. Now, this third assignment, the session reflection, involves submitting a video recording of a whole session of between 40 and 60 minutes. If the session was longer than 60 minutes, then we ask that the students edit that down to 60 minutes so that you don't have too much work to do. They also have to submit a written reflective analysis of up to 2,000 words. And what we're really looking for is the demonstration of core skills competencies. Now, the context for those sessions might vary. So it might be a session with an individual young person, it might be a session with a parent, it might be a session with a family, it might be a group session. We need the assignments handed in by the students by 9 o'clock on the 13th of July, and we need the mark sheets returned by the first markers on the 23rd of July. As with all of the assignments, this is not really about your opinion or how much you liked the assignment. This is about how the assignment measures up to the marking criteria. marking criteria anchors quite clearly what is considered a pass, a merit, and a distinction. And we're asking you to rely on that rather than on your own opinion. Ultimately, the marks need to be explainable and, if necessary, defensible. You will now be familiar with this categorization of percentages and the grades that go with it. And you should also have this document, which is the marking criteria that tells you what we're really looking for to fit into the different categories. On the marking sheet, we only want a number in that top box where it says mark. That's where you give it the final mark out of 100. And in the boxes in the sections below, just a ticker across to show which category you think each section falls into, and then some specific comments. In terms of those specific comments, the more the student understands your rationale for that mark, the less likely they are to feel aggrieved and the less likely they are to ask for more feedback. Generally, we would recommend 3 to 5 specific strengths and 3 to 5 specific areas for development. If you do less than that, then I think the students are going to want more. And if you do more than that, then I think you're just creating too much work for yourself. And your comments should be objective, evidenced, and grounded in the criteria. So some people find it very helpful to use the language from those criteria. In terms of what we ask them to submit, starting off with an introduction, some very brief biographical and contextual information. What's the main problem the person's coming with? What session number is it? What's the context of their service? And what are they going to be showing us in the rest of the assignment? And we also want a bit of information about the aim and the rationale for that particular session. And then we come to the real focus of this particular assignment, which is a demonstration of specific competencies. And we ask the students to specify exactly where on the recording they demonstrate these competencies. If you look on the core skills session competency framework, which we have to say we've stolen shamelessly from other sources, there are 8 different areas of competence. And within each of those areas, there's a number of different specific competencies. And for each of those specific competencies, there's a number of examples of how that competence might be demonstrated. The assignment requires students to demonstrate one competence from 5 areas of their choice, but those 5 areas must include A, B, and D. Sometimes as markers we can get a bit muddled if we're not really clear what it is precisely that we're marking. So marking of this assignment does not involve marking the whole of the recording against the whole of the competency framework. What we're really doing is focusing on the written reflection in relation to the recording. So the focus of this assignment is the student's ability to accurately identify and reflect upon 5 specific competencies. And it's worth bearing in mind there's a difference between a simple lack of competence and frank incompetence. Let's consider a few scenarios now that sometimes get people a little bit muddled. If the student claims a competence that is simply not demonstrated when they say it is, that section of the assignment will fail because they've not been accurate in their identification of their competence. Now, this might result in a fail of the whole assignment, but not necessarily so. It depends on how many of the competencies they've got wrong and how the rest of the assignment shapes up. If they accurately identify on the recording a specific competence, but that specific competence is simply absent elsewhere, well, we don't take any action, we simply mark the accurate identification of that competence. because variability of a competence is actually the norm throughout a single session. And obviously, the more they are able to reflect upon that variability, the higher their overall mark is likely to be. If they've identified a specific competence accurately, but elsewhere actually they demonstrate frank incompetence for that competence, and that frank incompetence actually raises concern from an ethical or a safeguarding point of view, then the incompetence outweighs the accurate identification of the competence, and that section of the assignment will fail. The marker's concerns should be noticed on the comments, and these will be passed on to the core skills module lead, the practice tutor, and the module lead, who will consider what action to take. If they are not competent in an area in which they are not claiming competence, well, no action, because we're focusing on the areas that they are claiming competence, unless, again, they are so frankly incompetent that it becomes an issue of safeguarding or ethical practice. In such cases, the assignment should be marked according to the market criteria and the focus on the specific competencies, but the marker's concerns should be noted in the comments, and these will be passed on to the core skills module lead, the practice tutor, and the module lead, who will consider what action to take. In the handbook, we've asked students to have a section on therapeutic outcomes. Now, this isn't on the mark sheet, and that's partly to make things as simple as possible. And then finally, the last section is about discussion and reflection. And we're asking students here to go beyond a simple identification of competence, but also a discussion of how that might come and go, what they've learned, and how they might improve their practice in the future. If you have any doubts, then please read the Core Skills Handbook. Contact us through this email address, cypi@therapy@annafreud.org, and our administration team will know who out of the Core Skills tutor team is most available at that moment to answer your query. And please do get in touch with us before you submit your marks if that's going to be useful. Do you know, it's much more simple from our point of view if you raise a concern whilst you're marking and we can discuss it with you, rather than you fail it or you trigger a second marking, then we have to watch the whole tape, whereas actually sometimes it can be more efficient if we actually have a discussion with you in advance. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks very much.